Hi, we're back with part two of person, environment, occupation, and person, environment, occupation performance. And right now we are looking at the PEO assumptions. And one of the things that you guys all brought out as you were looking at your online content prior to lecture today is the idea of fit. And this is a very important concept for PEO. And fit just means how big is that little triangle in the center where the three circles are overlapping. The more we can bring the circles together, the more we can make the environment match the occupational needs and the person needs. The more we can make the occupation match the person and fit within that environment, the better that fit is going to be, and the better the occupational performance is going to be as well. So function in the PEO is maximizing that fit, which gives better occupational performance, and dysfunction is simply a poor fit when the circles are pulling apart. PEO views that motivation as intrinsic, and change is constantly occurring. As one aspect changes, so do all the others. And with evaluation, we're looking for that fit. And so they don't really give us any specific tools. They don't really tell us what to use. But since this is a companion model to the CMOP, one of the things recommended is to use the COPM with that. And with intervention, we're maximizing the fit. So we're thinking about how can we pull the environment closer to the person needs? How can we modify what the person is doing or how the person is performing to pull them closer to their occupation? So we're looking at all three aspects at once to try to maximize that fit. And I feel like in that way, this model is very unique in that it's trying to focus on all the aspects at one time. It's more of a broad approach. We're not just looking at what are the person's skill set. So it's not just a bottom-up approach. We're not just looking at the occupation, so it's not a top-down approach. It's an everything, all-encompassing approach at once. Let's try to fix bits of all the parts and see if we can bring that fit together a little bit more. This is what amounts to the OT process in PEO terms. So it just kind of gives you a nice flow chart of how this happens as we're looking at assessing the individual. So we're looking at their strengths, but what are their problems as well. And we're looking at the person, the environment, and the occupation in order to assess that, bring it together, figure out how those are going to fit together to then create a plan that's going to work for this person, and then continually assess it and see what needs to change to continue to bring that fit closer together. So now we're moving into the person, environment, occupation performance model. And I've heard it called both occupation performance and occupational performance in the literature. So, take your pick. And there's my cat. Would you like to meet my cat? Here she is. Thought she'd make a cameo right now. So she's helping me with my work here today. All right. One difference with the PEOP is that the model, even though the concepts are dynamic and it is considered to be a transactional model, the visual model doesn't change. There's no moving in and out like with the PEO. So on the one side, we have the environment, and on the other side, we have the person, and they touch in the middle. So you can see the shading kind of behind the occupational performance. They touch in the middle. And in this model, they see the bridge between the person and environment to be occupation. So in that way, it's a lot like the CMOP. It is incorporating that concept of the CMOP that occupation is what brings the person and the environment together. And performance is what happens when everything is working well together. And they also use the word participation because performing it gives the connotation of doing it one time, and participation means you can do it whenever you want to. You can participate in the occupation at will. So there was a PEOP update. It's actually not as widely used as the older version, but it's trying to give more of a 3D concept. The idea is that those circles are supposed to be stacked. So in a way, it's looking a lot more like the CMOP. In this particular visual image. I've used the former one, the prior to 2015 one, most commonly because that's the one that most people still relate to. But I wouldn't be surprised if in coming days and years you start to see more of this model coming out. All right, the focus in this model is on engagement. So they use the words performance, participation, and engagement. And what the authors of this model say in terms of how their model differs and in how the engagement differs is the degree to which these concepts are defined. So what they're saying is that their model goes more in depth, looking at the aspects of these characteristics: person, environment, and occupation. And indeed, they do have more detail to their definitions. It is a top-down approach, meaning that they start with the occupation and then they trickle that down to what's going on with the environment and occupation. Or if you consider the visual model, they start in the center and move outward in their approach to assessment and intervention. And they also are one model that specifically states that people can be occupationally engaged even though they're not physically doing the occupation. And my example for this is we just had the Final Four, right? I hope you all cheered on your favorite basketball team. Go Irish ladies. I was so excited to see them win. But they are the ones who are physically engaged in the game. And as a spectator, I'm not playing the game, but I'm engaged in it. So that's, one example of how you can be occupationally engaged even though you're not physically doing the occupation. This model was also written specifically to apply to populations, communities, and organizations, which also makes it unique. Other models say that they do that, but PEOP actually provides you a template for how to do that, which you got to experience in your online content. So they define occupations much like the OT practice framework, what people want or need to do. Performance is when you do the occupations, and they also use the word competence, much like model of human occupation. Competence means that a person is able to perform, and it implies goal attainment. So there's an idea that there's a goal in mind. So that takes us back to some of our OT practice framework definitions of occupation, that there's always a goal involved. Here are some aspects of the person. I'm not going to go into these in great detail because you had opportunity to read those. But what PEOP says when it comes to assessment is that you look at all these aspects of the person and you're looking at them for whether they interfere with or support occupational performance. Here are some definitions of the environment. It's probably one of the more extensive definitions of the environment that we have in our occupation-based models, and they talk about context of performance. And I'll let you read those as well. I will not read those to you. So occupations, then, what people want or need to do, and they also consider the social aspect of occupations, that we are always either doing occupations with others or doing occupations to prepare ourselves for being with others, or simply to be in relationship with ourselves. So things that we do for our own identity. They also have the sort of nested concepts idea, but they call it hierarchy of occupational performance. And instead of saying activities, they say abilities and actions. So abilities are first. These are some of our traits that we have. We may or may not be using them, but we have that ability. So we have strength. Actions then are what we do with that, like lifting a box. Tasks are a combination of our actions, like being able to make a grocery list. And then occupations are things that include all those tasks and put them together, like being able to go to the grocery store, lift the items off the shelf, take the cart out to the car, put the items in the car. And then roles are sort of the reasons why we're doing those occupations, and it's the highest level. So grocery shopping might be one of my occupations for home manager. Paying the bills might be another, and that's all part of my role as a home manager. So here's the list of PEOP: function, dysfunction, change, motivation, and assessment. I feel like we've talked through some of those already, so I'm not going to go into great detail with that. Here's a little bit of a comparison of how PEO and PEOP line up. So you might want to stop and kind of study this slide a little bit to see some of the similarities and differences, which, by the way, you all did a great job catching on to those in your online assignment. Here are some of the benefits of PEOP that are put out there by the authors. They say that it looks at the factors influencing performance, the many dimensions of occupations, historical ideas. It's very client-centered, and also the idea that it can be applied to organizations and groups as well. Okay, you guys got to experience this applying the PEOP to an organization, so I'm not going to go into detail here. You already experienced all these items of how PEOP can be applied.